But yeah, it's been fun to do this. So welcome everybody to another episode of Gladiator H2F podcast. We're here with Major Kayla Ramotar. She is the XO of the Specialist Corps. Make sure I nailed that point home. But you are the founding mother of H2F, and that's awesome.
One of five.
We're okay, but we're incredibly grateful to have you here. This is hopefully an awesome conversation. So before we dive into H2F and some of the concepts, why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Absolutely. So I joined the Army Direct Commission in 2008. Started off my career like most dietitians in a hospital type setting. Went on a deployment with the 28th Cash in 2009, came back, went to Fort Carson, and that's when I started to really step my foot into the door for performance nutrition, working with the 4th ID and many of their athlete programs that they had there. Came back here in 2013 and was a program director, so I got to teach our enlisted nutrition and taught into many different programs, ran some field courses, and then moved on to become the command dietitian at the Center for Initial Military Training in 2016. And that's up at TRADOC headquarters in Fort Eustis. And during my time there, TRADOC was assigned to be the proponent and lead the initiative for the Army for holistic health and fitness. So by happen chance and by background, I got to step into the team and become the action officer for holistic health and fitness and start shaping that into what we are starting to see today as it's delivered to units and across the Army. And that team started off pretty small. It was one of 5 people that really started to shape it in its early days, and now it's grown exponentially. We have lots of people working on this project across the Army, multiple commands tapping into it. After I departed there, I ended up becoming the executive officer for the Army Medical Specialist Corps, which just happens to house the PTs, OTs, RDs, and PAs. So all the people that we're trying to leverage and put into these units as part of the H2F capability. So I get to see a lot of what I worked on come to fruition as we're putting people into the units. We're updating their training and making them more prepared. So it's really nice to sit back and see that come about. And right now we'll see what happens next, but still highly involved in H2F at this point.
Yeah. So was that just a coincidence or?
Well, I don't know. I applied for the job and interviewed, and they liked me, so I got it.
Okay.
So,
well, that's good.
But I like the next step because I did want to continue on with the H2F aspect and continue my service, giving back to the military and what I know. I've become somewhat of a subject matter expert over time as I've led some of these efforts and developed some of these products and tried to deliver a capability to the Army that the Army needs. So I don't think I'll turn that hat off just yet. My next job might have something to do with this too, but I don't mind this career path. I absolutely find this is my passion. This is what I love to do. It's not just about performance nutrition, which is my background. That is who I am. I am a dietitian, but it's about putting that together with all the different things the Army has, almost like a puzzle piece, and delivering something to commanders that they can use and maintain the readiness of their soldiers. I'm also incredibly passionate about holistic health and fitness, and even before holistic health and fitness was even adopted by the Army in a lot of the concepts. I was really into it and trying to understand is like, how do all these components fit, and why are they all, or how are they all interconnected, and how does that affect my performance? So this is something that I've been really into and invested in for myself and personal fitness goals and stuff. So it's been really interesting to me to see the Army lean so heavily into these concepts to create these health outcomes in soldiers, and just to improve or optimize our soldier lethality and improve overall outcomes. So this is something that I'm super passionate about and very curious to know what were like the beginning stages, because as we said, you're the founding mother. So it was a team effort.
Yeah, team effort. Yes, I understand. But I'm curious to know like what the catalyst, like where was the Army in the moment that they were like, aha, we need this?
Correct. So I think it was a culmination of many different aspects. So back in 2013, 2014, we really started to realize our soldiers were taking a toll, and they weren't quite as ready as they should be. And we were seeing non-deployable rates start to go up. And in 2020 alone, we had about 1,600 soldiers or so on temporary profile, but more importantly, about 15,000 on a permanent profile. That's a big number if you think about it. And when we looked at injury rates, and that this all comes from MedCom and the Surgeon General's office, but when we looked at injury rates, we had about 53% of the soldiers reporting some sort of injury annually. That's half of our force.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But of those injuries, you had about 71% of them are what we call overuse injuries. So that really goes back to how are we training and what's causing these overuse injuries, and what can we do to help bring that number down? Because the more injuries you have, or the longer it becomes an injury, it moves past the acute, and now it's chronic. And now we have permanent injury issues. And now we have people that can't deploy, they're not ready, and we're losing our force when really we need to be investing back into our force. But you add that with 1 in 20 people were failing the APFT. You add that in 1 in 20 people were taking prescription sleep medications, and about 12% of soldiers had a diagnosed sleep disorder. You add that in with the 17% of the total force that was overweight or obese at the time. You add these things together, and now we have a problem set of how do we address this issue? Because in the Army, we need our soldiers to be lethal. That's our weapon system. We need them to be ready. We need them to be fit. We need them to be tough. And if we can't invest in our one and only weapon system, our main weapon system, the soldier, then what are we going to do to turn that around? So that's how kind of the seeds of holistic health and fitness started to formulate. How do we address this issue? And if you look at what the special forces were doing with their tactical human performance optimization, reconditioning and recovery Thor 3. They're going to kill me for not doing that, right? But Thor 3 program, over the past 10 years, they've really started to establish a system that worked to support their operators. And we looked into that system and thought, how can we take that and apply it to the conventional force? What pieces of that program can we take and put in every operational unit we have available? And what are the best practices? What are the lessons learned? What's the evidence coming out of those programs that we can lean on and say, hey, we can see effectiveness here. Let's do it in the regular Army. But they're not the only ones we looked at. We did look at our allied forces. Australia, Britain, they have some great programs going on. We looked at professional and collegiate athlete programs. What are they doing? What people surround them? How do they approach fitness and readiness of their athletes? So taking that all together is how we started to formulate what can we do in the conventional force to get after this issue.
That's really interesting. You say, I'm assuming foreign partners and other nations and what they're doing. And you specifically mentioned that they're doing some good stuff. So what are some of those examples? So
they have actual MOSs, for instance, that are trainers. Strength and conditioning coaches. That's an MOS. It's a career path. And that is something the Army is looking into right now, into developing an MOS for our specialists to be fitness specialists. So that's one just little piece. Other pieces, those folks go to training for extremely long time. Instead of our master fitness course, it does its job. It gives folks the right information. But some of these nations send their folks to school for 6 months for fitness training.
Oh, wow.
So those are just a few small examples. They do have quite a few injury studies as well, and they're getting after those metrics that they're seeing in their force as well. So it's taking certain pieces of what they're doing and thinking, how can that apply to us? What pieces can we bring into our program that will work for our force and how we can move forward?
Yeah, and when I was reading your the concept, the holistic health and fitness concept, and it says the strategic environment, why do we need H2F? That's a grim read. Like with what you just mentioned before, like 13 BCTs or the equivalent of that are on permanent profile, and the obesity rate which was I think 17% of soldiers with who would be considered or marked as obese. This is it doesn't look good for us. So obviously it becomes it becomes very clear and apparent, like, hey, yeah, this is why we need something new and different. So what makes this model a lot different and better to get after these stats than the old model? Because I mean, it was still a fitness culture in the Army. Like, it was understood you had to be in shape. But why the change?
I think we realized that there were a lot of great programs, but they weren't comprehensive and all-inclusive. We had a good fitness program, a good sleep program, we had a nutrition program, but they weren't all working together in one joint piece. So how do we, again, take those puzzle pieces that the Army had and include pieces that the Army doesn't have and make one program that eventually, over time, could shift the culture of the Army? Because ultimately what we're trying to do is shift the cultural thinking. PT is not Monday through Friday, all out at 6:30 in the morning. It can't be that. We have to have recovery built in. We have to do something other than run. We have to do something other than push-ups and sit-ups. That's not going to make us the lethal soldier we need to be on the battlefield of the future. So how do we take aspects of even yoga, for instance, a great recovery program, something that can keep your body in shape, and include those into the mindset of the Army that's used to, there's your PT field, go run and go do your push-ups and sit-ups, and you've done your daily duty. So I think it's taking all the pieces together, making a comprehensive program that can be individualized. It's integrated, so it's not just unit by unit. It draws all the way up the chain of command, and it feeds in itself all the way up to the headquarters DA. So it's something that will be nested throughout the Army and not just here or there. This division has a program, but this one doesn't. This brigade has its own thing going on, but this one doesn't. This one's focused on just fitness and doesn't have sleep or nutrition. So it's, again, bringing it together to be comprehensive.
And again, like I said before, I love that concept because there are so many different pieces of fitness that all go together, that all build, and it's like I said, it's super refreshing to hear that the Army is moving forward to this to try to cause that cultural shift, as you mentioned, to be more mindful about how we get after fitness and what that looks like, and move away from the push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run type deal. But what were some of the, I know that you mentioned Thor, but what were some of the other inspirational ideas or concepts that were out there in the holistic health and fitness space that I guess were drivers for this change?
Sure. So there were hundreds. When we peeled back the onion, it was amazing to see how many commanders had stood up programs in their footprint across the Army.
Oh, wow.
And so looking at all those different programs, they all had pieces of what we were looking for. And two others that stand out in my mind that we really looked into was the RAW program that the Rangers had, the Ranger Athlete Warrior program. They had a really comprehensive program, much like Thor 3, that had specifically to the Rangers. So those were pieces from there that we definitely adopted. But then also the 4th ID had a Mountain Iron Horse Warrior program, or a mountain program as well. But in those pieces, we were noticing commanders focused on certain things. Sometimes you might get a little nutrition piece in it, but mostly they were very physical domain focused. So very much into the physical aspect of holistic health and fitness. There were big gaps when it came to the spiritual, the cognitive, the nutrition, or anything outside in the non-physical domain. We call it the touchy-feely stuff, right? The stuff that, it's there, we know it's important, but we can see the physical part. I can't see the sleep part and how that impacts until I see my soldier sleeping in front of me. So those are the pieces we really wanted to draw upon. And the Army Medical Department had some great programs going on that we could pull pieces of. G1 had some good programs in the resiliency programs that we wanted to pull pieces from. So there was a lot of different aspects that I think we just need to look at. What was the best, what had the biggest impact, and how can we put that together? Nutrition was always there when it came to the body composition program. But as a dietitian, I'll tell you, how frustrating is it that all you get are the overweight soldiers? As a performance dietitian, I want to talk to the soldiers that are performing well, and how can I get you to perform better by eating this meal instead of this meal, or just changing what you eat before you work out just slightly so that you could perform better and get maximum results. So it was changing the idea of, yes, I'm a dietitian, but I don't just work in a DFAC. I don't just give you your menu. I can do these other things for you, and this is what I can deliver to you as a commander. And same with a cognitive enhancement specialist. Performance specialist, once we started putting folks in front of them, hey, this is what they can offer you. They're like, I want that. How do I get that? You don't know you need it until you realize there are people out there that can do this for you and really change what your unit is doing.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Because there's just so much out there that is super beneficial. But when you mentioned Army Medical Department, were you referencing the Performance Triad?
Yes, so they had the three components of the Performance Triad, sleep, activity, and nutrition, and they have great components of it. Pieces of that is really what we made into the doctrine of FM 7-22. We tried to formulate some things, lessons learned from there, and other pieces in the literature that's out there in our own professions, and then also what the Army was seeing with the programs that they had, and kind of combined it into one piece.
Yeah. I remember it was like 2013, 2014-ish, when I was at the NCO Academy, and we were, I guess, I don't know, not to say mandate, but it was introduced into our curriculum to help generate awareness of the Performance Triad and help the individuals, the NCOs that would come through the academy, help them understand, hey, sleep, nutrition, activity, these are all components of fitness, and they all kind of blend together. And I remember it being facilitated in an interesting way through the lens of the direct level leader. And this is the information that you need to know as a direct level leader to influence your soldiers to perform better and to have better health outcomes. Now, how is the new concept in H2F, what does that look like at the direct level in regards to that?
So same idea. We want all of this information to be at the lowest level possible. And we want the dissemination of it to be even down to the squad leader level, the platoon sergeant level, all the way, all those different levels is really where we need to get it down to. So how do we do that from a leader education standpoint? So I like to say that leader education piece is multifaceted. There's several different arms to it. The first being, when you first come in the Army, you as a soldier need to be indoctrinated into what is H2F, what does it mean, what are all these components of H2F, and how does that work for you as the individual soldier? What do you need to know about your physical activity, your nutrition, your sleep, your spiritual wellness, your cognitive enhancement? What do those pieces look like for you? And then as you progress throughout your career and you attend professional military education, whether that be WLC or, for officers, career courses, you advance up through that education, you get more information and more pieces and more education so that you can turn around in your leadership position and then continue that teaching and continue that cultural shift and environment within your AO or whatever working space that you have and whatever soldiers or people are within your space. And that goes all the way up to general officer, and command sergeant major. It doesn't stop at the lowest level. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, how do we train our professions? So as a dietitian, when I first came in, we did field food service and we did clinical. If you wanted performance, you were lucky if you got a job somewhere and someone wanted you and you could do that sort of stuff. But now we have a clear path for that. So how do we ensure that our dietitians' critical skills are trained in that path? Well, the same for OTs and PTs. How do we train in that readiness domain when we're used to training in the clinical treatment domain by the chance of where we were located before? So changing that professional training path and including other pieces in it from the start when they come through basic officer training. How do we do that piece? So that's got to be formulated. And then the last piece is really what happens in the program within the footprint. So your dietitians and whoever's there, how do they train the leaders within their organization and the soldiers themselves to continue that education and expand their knowledge to not just take care of themselves, but how do I take care of those in my unit? What can I do to influence them? Do I need different equipment? Do I need to liaison with the dining facility? Do I need to liaison with other brigades and leverage things that they have? So all of that together, the leader aspect and how we get the information to the lowest level possible starts at the beginning. When you first step into the Army, I like to say when you first raise your hand, but really it's when you first cross that threshold going into training. Yeah. So that's kind of those pieces of it.
Yeah. When you were explaining that, it kind of made me think of where I'm at right now, and trying to facilitate H2F in a kind of ever-evolving, all multifaceted, all the variables, and trying to deliver it in a way that makes the most sense. It's challenging because H2F, it says it's for the individual. Right, that's what it says in the doctrine. But of course, we have to consider how we implement it to the masses, and considering the massive amounts of soldier population that we have. Like right now in our H2F program, we have 200 plus, and that's a lot. That's a lot of soldiers. So how do you then, or what was the vision for delivering this concept to the individual in such a large group?
So as a CIMT dietitian, I'll tell you this. My audience and the people I worked with was not the trainee themselves. It was the drill sergeant population.
Oh, cool.
Because I needed to leverage them who are in front of the trainees 24/7, literally, to disseminate the right information. So my entire focus was, how do I understand what they know now, what their beliefs and attitudes are for nutrition, for example, and how do I shape that so that they believe in what we've written in the doctrine and that it will work, and then disseminate that to the trainees? Because it's not just about the 1 hour nutrition class they get in basic training.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just 1 hour. You'll learn the basics in 60 minutes, but you don't learn how to apply it or what to do when you're in the field or you're eating an MRE or whatever the case is. But how do I teach those drill sergeants, hey, when you're out in the field, this is what you can be telling them when they're sitting around eating when you have an MRE. Let's pick it apart. Eat this now. After the event, eat this piece or do this. Yeah. So it's getting them the knowledge and skills, but sometimes you have to get past personal beliefs.
Yeah.
And, anecdotal type misinformation or lack of information.
Yeah.
And that's the culture shift that's hard. So you have to pick an audience, and the audience that you want to leverage that has the most face time in front of those soldiers at the lowest level, and think, how do I get them to buy in? Because once they do, the information's going to flow.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Delivering it to the drill sergeants because, we're the presence that's constant in those soldiers' lives. What's crazy about what you were just saying about the culture is that a lot of us drill sergeants, when we were privates, our first sergeant would be out there in front of formation with a cup of coffee and a cigarette, getting ready to do lead PT, and we're just like, okay, this is that's the culture that we grew up in.
Yep.
So that's what shaped us. That's how we were indoctrinated. So yes, to your point, those beliefs, the how we grew up, it's shaped us, and it's shaped a lot of our decisions and how we view fitness, nutrition, and all of those other awesome aspects. So I get the challenges of trying to shift that into, instead of it being like the first sergeant that's up there with the coffee and cigarette to the one that's facilitating yoga with a smoothie. That's obviously, maybe it doesn't look exactly like that, but
it's a
that's
spectrum.
yeah. Maybe that's one side. I don't know, but that's interesting, and it kind of makes me want to ask a little bit more. And I don't know if you can speak to this, but when you mentioned PME in the concept, I wonder what. If there is anything, or what was considered to deliver this to, like the Drill Sergeant Academy. Is there any concept or thought to introduce POI to that so that they can continue to do this in all the other areas in which they're drill sergeants?
Yes. So one of the pieces that's being updated as we speak is the basic combat training POI. Drill sergeants are trained on that POI for the most part. So as by happen chance of having to learn the new POI, once all the H2F components are in there, they'll be learning more in depth because they do have to become somewhat of a subject matter expert in all aspects about those critical pieces of H2F. But it doesn't just stop there either. So getting into the first sergeant and company commanders courses, getting into the senior leader commander courses, whether that's battalion or brigade level or higher. And TRADOC has done a great job of tapping into the TRADOC command courses, and ForceCom is starting to put that into their command courses as well. So I think all entities are really trying to get at the leader level at that point, but I still go back to the fact that it's your frontline leaders. They're the ones passing that information. I mean, how often, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but how often is your brigade commander in front of the soldier? Definitely not 24/7. No. They'll be walking around. They may see them daily or a couple times a week, that sort of thing. But it's the ones that see them daily that we need to leverage and make sure they're experts, because eventually they will become the first sergeant. They will become the command sergeant major. And eventually, 10 years down the road, that culture has changed. Now, what it changes into, I have my predictions. I'm sure a lot of people do. I think there's still a lot of naysayers out there saying this will never happen. It's rolling. The train is rolling. Jump on or get out. I mean, that's kind of my mentality as I speak with people. You know, senior leaders have bought into this. Yeah. And they bought into all aspects of it. There's certain pieces that still have to be ironed out, but it's moving, and funding has been attributed to it, when in the past it's been zero. Yeah. So let's jump on board and think, how can I, in the middle of my career, I like to say, you know, how can I influence those coming up behind me, and what can I do to change that? Yeah.
It makes me reflect to what you were just discussing about how senior leaders are bought in. I know that my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Menendez, who was also on this podcast, he is very bought in. He says this is one of his top priorities, helping to change that culture, so that we as drill sergeants, as cadre of the 232, we're not only preaching that positive message, but being the walking the walk, I guess you could say, and leading by example to show to new soldiers, like, hey, this is what H2F looks like. I'm doing it. You can do it. All those types, to try to change the culture. But when you talked about predictions, what was some predictions, I guess, as far as how long it would take the culture to change?
In my own, I'll give my personal prediction, because I think those true analysts will give their own based on the metrics they see, right? Yeah. I think it's going to be about 10 to 15 years, 10 to honestly. 15 years. And the reason for that is because you really have to get the individuals, the program, the equipment, and all the different components into place before you can truly start to generate results. We're seeing some initial results. There's over 24 metrics that they're following across the Army. Everything from fitness metrics to injury metrics to nutrition metrics to sleep, even to just mental health and well-being. And to really see some shifts in that, it's going to take time. Nothing changes overnight. You're not going to lose 40 pounds overnight. And what we're seeing in some of the units is these professionals are going in, and all of a sudden metrics get worse. Well, why do you think that is? It's not because things got worse. It's because there was a problem that we just really didn't have eyes on before, or to the depth that these professionals are looking at before. So when we say, hey, profile rates went up, you know why? Because we're catching an acute injury before it becomes chronic. Not because more injuries are happening. It's because we're catching them upstream. And why did body fat composition rates go up? It didn't go up because people are just getting bigger. It went up because now we got eyes on a problem, and we're starting to catch people 1% to 2% before they bust their weight intake. Yeah. So that's really what we see happening. And that initial blip we predicted. We said when people, and Thor 3 saw the same thing. When everyone goes in and they start to change something, you see things go up and then settle back down. But I would still predict about 10 years before you see significant return on investment results, meaning we're now saving dollars from the healthcare side because we're preventing things before becoming a chronic injury, or before someone has to go through a medical evaluation board or be chaptered out of the Army for, even alcohol-related or drug-related issues, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I know that we've already seen a pretty staggering change in who we were, or the amounts of soldiers that we were MEBing and chaptering out. Now it's down drastically, and I don't have the number for a very specific number, but it's huge. Like, we were chaptering and MEBing out a lot of soldiers, and now we're not. And it's because we were able to implement, rehabilitation, reconditioning type programs that caught these soldiers before their issues became too bad that they no longer could serve. And then also, yes, we did see a spike. It kind of reminds me of our own personal experience, because we were able to cultivate a culture of like awareness and when we were doing our screenings, like, because obviously it's early prevention or early intervention, identification, that's what we're trying to get after. So as soon as they get here, we're setting up a screening, like, hey, who was hurt in basic training, who did this, who's been hurt before, who's got an injury now, those type of things, so that we can get them to the clinic so they can get seen. So originally there were small numbers because there's a stigma associated with basic training, like if you get hurt, you're recycled or you're done. But now that we've been able to shift the culture a little bit, now we're getting more people to report. So it's not that necessarily that our injury rates were up, it's just now that people are reporting, and we have more tangible evidence that we have more profiles. The soldiers were still hurt. And it was evident in the amount of people that we were chaptering, and now we're not. So I get that. And now it's so getting to our challenges. What are the? I understand that ForceCom has a method in which they're delivering H2F. How is that different for the IET environment?
So I wouldn't say it's different.
Okay.
But it has some different delivery approaches, I would think. And that's just by nature of the environment in which you're in, a training environment versus an operational environment. And that's even different than a TDA environment, like a hospital or an office building. So we all have one doctrine. The program designed in that doctrine is all one and the same. ForceCom, unlike TRADOC, they have smaller companies just by the nature of what they are. I always say TRADOC's a harder job. Don't tell ForceCom that. No, it's neither here nor there. It's a matter of opinion. The delivery is different because in the training environment, it's much more structured. It's much more laid out. There's, every hours of their day is almost accounted for because they do have a program of instruction they have to get through for their MOS type training, especially here in the AIT environment. So it's a little bit more of that structured piece versus in the operational side where we're really relying on that H2F team to design a program to meet the mission essential tasks of that unit. How do you get an armor unit ready to complete their mission versus an engineer unit versus an infantry unit? Their program designs in the sense of physical fitness may look a little bit different, but it all has the same components when you peel back the onion. It still has agility training, it still has strength training, endurance training, flexibility, reaction time, all those components are there, but how they go about doing it might be slightly changed based on the culture of their unit. The same thing with sleep. A sleep expert might come in and think, oh, I've done an assessment on this unit. It doesn't really have a sleep problem. Maybe that's not where we need to put all our focus right now, but man, do they have an overweight problem. So step up dietitian on the team. Let's see how we can get after that and see what we need to do. Whereas an infantry unit might say, hey, we don't have a nutrition problem, so to speak, but man, our infantrymen aren't shooting well. Don't ever tell them that because they're experts, right?
Yeah.
But something's going on. We can't figure out why they're not focused and they're not, maxing out on their scores on the range. So the cognitive enhancement expert might come in and say, what do we need to do to work on focus or anything like that? So it really comes down to the team, assessing the unit, getting after what the unit's needs are at that time and what the commander's intent is. What's the commander's focus? Like, where is he or she going that they need to deliver on for them? So that's how it would look slightly different. Most of our training units are somewhat the same in the sense of how they deliver their day. So it's a little bit, I don't want to say cookie cutter because it's still individualized, but it's a little bit more accounted for as you deliver it.
I guess that makes sense. And now for those that haven't had the opportunity to experience those H2F units in ForceCom, how are they staffed right now?
So some units have full staff, some only have partial staff, and some have none yet. So some have all the goods and some don't.
Yeah, but
and I wouldn't say all the goods.
I guess what is the concept? Like, what was the vision for staffing?
Okay, so with the larger, we call them Tier 1 brigades, and those are your larger BCT type brigades. They will receive an additional military, so on the military side, an additional physical therapist, occupational therapist, and registered dietitian. On the civilian side, so GS, they will get another physical therapist, occupational therapist, and dietitian. So there's 1 and 1 each.
Cool.
Then on the contractor side, only because we don't have these positions in a GS series, in a government type series, will be the strength and conditioning coaches, the athletic trainers, and the cognitive performance specialists. So all those components combined are what really bring about the team. When I left CIMT, the enlisted had been pulled off the table, and then they were put back on, which is a great good news story. We really need our enlisted counterparts in there. So our enlisted counterparts, the physical therapy tech, occupational therapy tech, and the nutrition tech, those are back into the plan and also part of that team.
Okay, cool.
So, but the Tier 2 brigades get something a little bit smaller just based on their mission and their makeup of their organization. They will get the same capabilities, just a little bit less.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
I guess that makes sense. And now I know that there's a plan in place to bring something very similar to the TRADOC and the IAT environment. And that's exciting.
That was a huge win. So at first, we were really focused on the operational side, and I kept thinking as we were talking, how do we get early on and upstream? Well, that's the TRADOC side. Some of these trainees are in training for over a year. Yeah. And some of these other MOS trainings can be 9 months or longer. So how do we get upstream? So adding in the TRADOC units to get an H2F capability with equipment and personnel and the program, that was huge. So I'm excited to see them as part of the plan. Some of those units have got their folks, and they're starting to roll in now. Others have to wait. AIT units mostly have to wait. But the idea is that everyone will have something.
Cool. Yeah, I know that's going to be a huge win for the Army, because having those individuals, those subject matter experts that can influence the culture early. As we talked about, being involved in these soldiers' lives and early on into the initial stages of the indoctrination program process, to let them know, like, yeah, hey, this is what H2F looks like. This is the Army. This is the culture. And then, that again, that's how you drum up the cultural changes. So, we can ensure that we're getting the first sergeant leading formation with the smoothie instead of the cigarette. Yeah. So
I still want to see this picture. I think it should go into the doctrine as well.
Yeah, to have a nice little picture of the first sergeant with the smoothie.
And going back to the first sergeant with the smoothie, so PT is not just in the morning, and that's part of that culture shift, is how do we rotate units through, not just in a facility, but in any type of place that has all the physical equipment that you needed throughout the entire day, because it's training. It's physical training, yes, but it's still training. Do we only go to ranges in the morning between 6:30 and 7:30? No, they're all day long, and you're rotating on different ranges depending on which ones are available. So the idea is physical training can happen at any point in the day. It does not have to happen in the morning. So if you've had a late night and your unit was out late doing something, maybe night land nav, don't get them up at 6:30 in the morning for PT. Do it at noon. Do it at 1:30, depending on the weather. I don't want to negate the fact that weather's an issue, but these are different aspects that you have to shift that change. You have to take it and think, okay, I grew up doing PT only at this time. If I don't do it in the morning, I don't do it at all. No, let's figure out how we can do it throughout the day or at different points throughout the day.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that what we've been able to do is we've kind of pieced together some sort of, it's actually a pretty good gym. We've got the equipment, and we've been slowly piecing it together just so that, we can change the culture. So, we'll see drill sergeants and cadre members working out throughout the day, and we'll encourage soldiers to come work out after POI, just so they understand, like, again, to your point, it doesn't necessarily have to be in that PT window. It can happen whenever, and that's good, because, again, that's how you change the culture.
Exactly.
But I did want to shift the conversation to something that's more in your wheelhouse.
Okay.
So you are a dietitian, and as you stated before, you were a significant contributor. You wrote the nutrition piece. What did you have in mind for, I guess, as the idea or the basis for nutrition and what that looks like in the Army?
So really, most of the concept that we've put into the doctrine came from a model that the Special Forces was using. So we have a dietitian at USASOC, and they've been in that position for quite some time. And we were looking at Thor 3 and what was the model? What is the approach? Like, how did it work for operators and why is it so successful? And why is nutrition issues less of an issue so much for them? They still have challenges that they face, but it's made a lot of headway. And the model that they used was what we call a proactive, active, reactive model. So that means prevention, performance, and rehabilitation recovery. Like, what do you do in the injury state? So putting nutrition and overlaying it in that model, I thought to myself, how can we make this work for the conventional force? So we can show folks where they are in any stage in their career, in their year, or just in their periodization cycle of deployment, training, whatever the case is. So in that proactive piece or the prevention piece, it's really getting after basic healthy eating requirements. So eating the right number of calories to maintain your weight, eating the right types of food to make sure you get all your macronutrients and your vitamins and your minerals, good healthy eating habits of, when you go out to eat, yes, you can have a little bit, but everything in moderation. How do you get good drinking habits when it comes to drinking water or low-calorie beverages? Getting after the energy drink issue, which feeds into the sleep issue. So the caffeine use, when should we be using it or not using it? So really laying the foundation for nutrition education and lifestyle habits. And then as they begin to train or train up for a mission or deployment, how do we shift them into that performance piece? And what does that look like? Well, that's really environment-specific, mission-specific type performance nutrition, and things can change. So I always say to people in basic training, stop taking the salt off my table. It's hot. Yeah. These soldiers need salt. Yeah. I don't care about low-salt diets or high blood pressure when they're training. Yeah. Tell me that problem when they hit a point where they're sitting at a desk all day long and we need to watch their blood pressure. Yeah. So how do we get after those task-specific needs when it comes to nutrition? And that's even down to when you're doing a ruck march. What do you need to have on hand? How do you prep for that nutritionally, not just physically? How do you recover for that nutritionally, not just physically? So very task-specific, environment-specific, and getting after those performance nutrition needs. And then segueing that into, oh no, you got an injury. It happens. We are not going to prevent all injuries in the Army. It's literally impossible, just like you can't prevent attrition from happening. You'll have some sort of baseline. But what do we do once you become injured? Because for most people, if they have a significant injury, the physical activity stops. It's going to come to a complete stop. Yeah. Until something's figured out. Now, usually if a physical therapist catches it in time, the coach catches it in time, athletic trainer, anybody catches it in time, you can usually recover pretty quickly, rehabilitate them, and get them back out and ready for the commander. Sometimes it requires surgery, and that recovery can be much longer. Sometimes 6 months to a year. Yeah. And what we're seeing is, hey, we want you back on the line in 6 months. It says you can take a PT test. No. They came off profile. It doesn't mean they can take a PT test. We don't want to re-injure them. Mm-hmm. And some of these things take a year to recover. Hip surgeries, knee surgeries, shoulder surgeries. We don't want to re-injure it because then we've pretty much lost them. Yeah. So what do you do in that nutrition piece? How do I balance that you're no longer exercising and you're no longer burning 3,000 calories a day? You need to adjust your eating habits. Mm-hmm. That's a mental thing. Yeah. I'm used to eating this much. You're telling me I have to do what now? How do I readjust that? But also, how do I get after nutrient needs that might be lacking in a recovery environment? So higher protein needs. Do they need more iron because they just had surgery? Do they need more calcium because it's bone related? There's various aspects that we look at in the very much clinical side of things. And how do I get them back to the point of let's lay the foundation and get you back into your performance realm? So of those three, I call them circles. It's like my triad. I was not the founder of that concept, but we did take that concept as, hey, this is a best practice. Mm-hmm. And now it's actually been placed into our standard operating practice and how we practice as performance dietitians across the nation. So it's a pretty great concept, and I think it's one that will last a pretty long time, a lifetime, unless someone new and brilliant comes along. So,
well, that's good news because I like the idea of changing again to shift the culture. So, how does this doctrine and these concepts change our dining facilities?
So, that's a double-edged sword. You're going to get me on this one. I'm going to give you your answer, but we're going to be careful. Okay. So, TRADOC commanders don't own their dining facilities.
Yes.
All right. FORSCOM commanders have much more say. The ultimate owner of how we deliver money for meals comes from the DoD. So the service takes our basic food allowance and converts that into menus. In basic training, we came up with an initial military training food menu, and it's pretty standardized. We tried to keep it to, what can we give them that helps them eat properly, helps them get the calories and the nutrients they need for training, because a lot of them go from, I call 0 to 4,000 calorie burn a day, based on what they were doing before they crossed the line into training. So how do we balance that out? And it's, it is what it is. It's a dining facility menu. We have a lot of good options, and it's dependent on the facility on how it gets implemented. But for the most part, it's pretty standardized. Now, when you go to FORSCOM dining facilities, they have a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more creativity, and the commanders have a lot more say. So how do we stick to our basic DoD nutrition standards? Because we do have pages outlined of what that is, down to how many juices you can serve and how much 100% juice has to be in there, and how many starchy vegetables can be on the line. There's all these standards that you have to go by. How do we make sure the standards get met, but still deliver what the soldier, tastes good, looks good, and, fuels them for what they need? Yeah. It's a balance. It's a balance between those good foods that you like, home cooking type foods, and healthy foods, and what we should be teaching to them. So hopefully over time, as our H2F folks get into place, there'll be more of that liaison between the dining facility teams or the food program managers team and the folks who want to have say in the menu, and then realistic solutions. I'm a realist as a dietitian. Some dining facilities took out fryers. Okay, that's fine. Some leave it in. Okay, that's fine. We got to pick our battles, and sometimes it's about comfort and making them feel good, and sometimes it's about making them eat healthy and feel good. We got to find that balance.
Yeah. And I mean, when, in regards to fryers, I mean, you could just change the oil and change it from regular potatoes to sweet potatoes.
There's a lot of different ways to do it. And yes, do the air fryers work? Yeah, some places have them and have invested in them, and they work great. So I'm not going to knock any changes that have been made out there. I'm certainly not going to go against any efforts the dietitians are doing. I just think there's a balance. There's a middle of the road that we have to come to, because the extremes, if you go to one extreme, they're just going to go down the road to McDonald's or Popeyes. If you go to the other extreme, they're not going to eat healthy because that's the option they have, and it's equivalent to McDonald's or Popeyes. So we got to find that middle of the road that gives them options. And we find nowadays our trainees coming through, they do want to eat a little bit healthier. I'm starting to see that culture coming in, like, what can I do to make myself better? They're more open-minded in that sense, not saying that our generations weren't, but they're just a little bit more open to looking at things differently. But they also come in with their own food beliefs. Yeah. And their own history of how they've eaten. Yep. Some of them have never had a carrot in their life, or they don't know where the chicken patty comes from, but it's there. There is a huge knowledge gap when it comes to this generation coming up, but we're hoping that this will help answer that problem and help address it. Yeah.
From what I've seen, from my perspective, is that there's been a shift in culture and society. It seems like there's more of a appetite, no pun intended, for healthier eating and healthier lifestyles. So yes, I've also seen that in our soldier medic population. There's a desire to eat better and to actively be a participant in taking care of your own body and what you put into it as fuel. Right. So that's good. So I guess to couple with that, what types of cultural societal changes have influenced the Army's nutritional ideas?
Oh boy. I call it the fads, and it didn't necessarily influence our ideas. It influenced how we approach the education and training based on the knowledge base of our population. So when I go into a classroom, I kind of assess, what age group do I have in general? Are they officer or enlisted? Where are they in their career if they are? Where have they come from? What part of the country am I in? If you're in the South, you're going to have a different cultural trend when it comes to food. If you're in the North, it's a little bit different. So really getting after what are they coming in with? And then also realizing fad diets have a huge impact nowadays because Google is accessible by anyone. So paleo diets, keto diets, slim fast diets, this diet, that diet, they come in with a history of trying a lot of these that in the past I hadn't seen before. Usually by the time they got in the Army, they're trying it because somebody told them to try it. And it's getting after, hey, I'm not knocking your thoughts on this diet, but I'm going to show you why in your job right now that may not work for you. And providing them the knowledge they need to make the right choice. I don't make the choice for them. They have to make the choice for themselves. So how do I give them enough information to make the right choice or a safe choice when it comes to being in a training environment? So really that's how I shape the education is how do I take what you know or misinformation that you know and work it into a way where I'm giving you education to make a choice and hopefully the good one.
Yeah. And I like that because I think that's what H2F is trying to get after, more so the education piece from a preventative mindset, to try to help educate and empower people to be more to have more ownership of their body and their health and their fitness. So something that we do in 232 is we have a dietitian that not only talks to all of our training companies as soon as they get here, kind of let them know, like, hey, this is what the demands of this AIT environment will be on you. These are the types of thoughts that you need to start thinking about food. This is how you should be, going through the dining facility, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then also on top of that, having an opportunity to do these one-on-one conversations with these soldiers who have those experiences, whether they're from the South or the North, and they have those food thoughts already, or maybe they're talking about keto or whatever veganism that they've heard or been influenced into, and help them make better choices based off of those ideas, so that we can improve the outcomes. Right. Whether that's here in 232 and also, when you get to ForceCom and you're in those Tier 1 units with those dietitians and nutritionists, they can set up these educational opportunities. And that to me is like the biggest win ever, is to helping people understand, like, this is what nutrition looks like and this is how it could benefit you. And again, that's like I said, it's one of those awesome things that the Army is caught on to, and it's just like, we need to change the way that we think about it. So that's good. But what does the future look like
for nutrition? Yeah,
for nutrition and then holistic health and fitness in general.
So I think the future of nutrition is we're going to start to see a population much more invested in it. When I look back at the history of our Army, and not just our armies in Europe, I did this whole analysis and I started looking at it. At first our armies were really concerned about how do we get food to the people, like to the soldiers, right? How do we get food? We got to look at logistics. How do we get the food to the right person? And then slowly over time, we got the food going. We got trains, we got different locomotive ways, lots of logistics flowing, but how do we get the right food to them? We can't just give them bread and meat. That's not fueling them. How do we get them the right fuel? So lots of studies over time. And I'm sure Lieutenant Colonel Behringer talked about this, what nutrients you need to fuel your body and really get after. We figured that out, and we created all these rations, too, that give you all the nutrients you need in one little kit, nice and compact. But one thing that we had a hard time figuring out is, how do you get that soldier to make the choice to eat that?
Yeah.
How do you get them to make the choice to eat that over something that's just down on the corner? And that is the piece that I think H2F answers. We're giving them the knowledge and the education so that they can start making that choice, because that's the missing piece. It's a personal decision. Eating is emotional. Eating is individual. It's behavioral. So how do we get after that behavior so that we start to see this shift? So that's where I see the future going. I think this is answering the call that we've been looking for, and I think it's because it's immersive, it's comprehensive, it's in the unit. And I think that's true for all of H2F. We're finally putting all the pieces in the right place. We've had them there. We've known about them. We've known about these injury problems for quite some time. They're documented. We have researchers showing it over and over again. But now we have leaders invested in putting it down to the lowest level that we possibly can. And I think you'll see over time it's going to grow. I think this is the start. It's the foot in the door. When people say, this is huge, how is this the foot in the door? I think 10 years from now, you'll see it start expanding, because we have a lot of units out there that aren't built into the H2F program delivery concept in the sense of capabilities that they're receiving. So if you look at the hospitals, they're not getting an H2F team.
Yeah.
They're not getting an entire equipment set, but they're also not deployable. So how do we get them the H2F concept and the capabilities that it has to meet their needs when they're not in a TRADOC or FORSCOM type unit?
Yeah. I think then it becomes up to the individuals within those units to assess the local needs.
Correct.
and to get with those commanders and develop a way, a creative way to get after the specific problem. So I guess if you're in a hospital right now, it's on you. Hopefully you're an empowered leader out there that wants to get after it.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Like I said, I'm really excited about the future. Really love H2F, love the direction that it's going, and can't wait to see. Hopefully sooner than 10 years, but I understand change takes time. So,
it takes time.
Yeah, but thank you very much, ma'am, for doing this. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully in a few years from now we'll have a conversation about how far it's come.
Oh, I can't wait. Thanks so much. Awesome.